24. Furthermore, Mahamati, bodhisattvas should become adept at examining the two kinds of phenomena that have no self. And what are the two kinds of phenomena that have no self? Neither beings nor dharmas have a self. And what does it mean that beings have no self? The assemblage of the skandhas, the dhatus, or the ayatanas arises from ignorance, karma, and desire and includes neither a self nor anything that belongs to a self. As the grasping and attachment of such senses as the eye to form give rise to consciousness. Bodies, houses, and the world of objects that are perceptions of one's own mind are fabricated and manifested from one's own projections. They change and disappear every moment, like a river or a seed or a candle or the wind or a cloud. Restless like a monkey. Attracted to impurities like a fly. And insatiable like a wind-blown fire. They move like a water wheel. Through life after life and bodily form after bodily form, impelled by habit energy without beginning, like figures produced by some sort of magic trick or spell or mechanical device. To be skilled in the knowledge of such appearances means to know that beings have no self. And what does it mean to know that dharmas have no self? It means to be aware that the self-existence of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas is imaginary. That the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas are devoid of a self or anything that belongs to a self. That the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas are assemblages tied to desire and karma and that they arise from the interplay of conditions but are themselves passive, and that all dharmas are like this. Through the power of imagination, fools give rise to erroneous projections devoid of individual or shared characteristics. But not the wise, because they transcend the mind, the will and consciousness, the five dharmas, and the modes of reality. Mahamati, bodhisattvas should become adept at seeing no self in anything at all. Bodhisattvas who become adept at seeing no self in dharmas soon gain an insight into the freedom from projections that characterizes the initial bodhisattva stage. And they delight in examining the characteristics of such awareness. As they continue their steady advance, they go beyond the ninth stage to the Dharma cloud stage, where they create huge lotus flowers decorated with countless jewels and resembling jeweled thrones on which they sit and practice in this realm of illusory existence. And where they are joined by bodhisattvas of similar attainment and their retinues. From every Buddhaland, Tathagatas come and anoint their foreheads, just as a Chakravartin anoints the forehead of the crown prince. Having gone past the bodhisattva stage, they attain the personal realization of the realm of Buddha knowledge. And because they see no self in any dharma, they acquire the incomparable dharma body of a Tathagata. This is what no self in dharmas means. You and the other bodhisattvas should cultivate this. 25. Mahamati then asked the Buddha, Bhagwan, please teach us about assertion and denial so that I and the other bodhisattvas can avoid these two pernicious views and quickly attain unexcelled, complete enlightenment, and once enlightened, we might avoid eternalistic assertions and nihilistic denials and not slander the true Dharma. Upon hearing Mahamati Bodhisattva's request, the Buddha replied in verse, assertions and denials don't exist where there is only mind. As for the body, the world, and possessions, unable to see these are mind, and bereft of any wisdom, fools assert and deny. The Buddha then explained the meaning of this verse and told Mahamati, there are four kinds of assertion regarding what is non-existent. And what are the four? They include assertions of a non-existent characteristic, assertions of a non-existent view, assertions of a non-existent cause, and assertions of a non-existent existence. These are the four kinds of assertion. As for denial, this means denying what is asserted because it cannot be grasped or observed. This is what is meant by assertion and denial. Mahamati. As for the assertion of a non-existent characteristic, this refers to becoming attached to a non-existent individual or shared characteristic among the skandhas, the dhatus, or the ayatanas as being like this and not other than this. His is what is meant by the assertion of a non-existent characteristic. Such assertions of a non-existent characteristic are the result of attachment to the habit energy of different mistaken projections without beginning. Mahamati. As for the assertion of a non-existent view, this refers to asserting the view of a self, a person, a being, a life, or an individuality among such entities as the skandhas, the dhatus, or the ayatanas. This is what is meant by the assertion of a non-existent view. Mahamati. As for the assertion of a non-existent cause, this refers to an original consciousness which does not arise from causes that would render it unreal or illusory, and which does not subsequently arise by itself but only arises after eyes, form, light, and memory arise. And once it exists, it ceases. This is what is meant by the assertion of a non-existent cause. Mahamati. As for the assertion of a non-existent existence, this refers to attachment to assertions of the existence of what is uncreated, such as space, cessation, or nirvana. These neither exist nor do not exist. And any dharma that neither exists nor does not exist is like the perception of a rabbit horn or a horse horn or a strand of hair. It neither exists nor does not exist. This is what is meant by assertions of a non-existent existence. Assertions and denials are the projections of fools unskilled in examining what are nothing but perceptions of their own minds. This is not true of the wise. Therefore, you should practice avoiding the pernicious views of assertion and denial. 26. Furthermore, Mahamati. Once bodhisattvas have completely fathomed the characteristics of the mind, the will and conceptual consciousness, the five dharmas, the modes of reality, and the two kinds of no-self, in order to help others, they appear in a variety of guises, just as imagined reality is based on dependent reality. And like magic gems that reflect every color, they appear in every Buddha assembly, in every Buddhaland, where they hear teachings that transcend those of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. Teachings such as all dharmas are like an illusion, a dream, a shadow, or moonlight on the water, and avoid the arising or cessation, the permanence or impermanence of all dharmas. And they enter hundreds of thousands of samadhis, countless hundreds of thousands of samadhis. And as they do so, they travel to other Buddhalands and venerate other Buddhas and are reborn in celestial palaces, where they praise the three treasures and appear as Buddhas themselves, surrounded by assemblies of Shravakas and Bodhisattvas, and where they liberate beings by explaining to them that what they perceive is nothing but their own mind and that external existence does not exist, thus enabling them to transcend such views as existence and non-existence. The Buddha then repeated the meaning of this in verse: the world as nothing but mind. This is what bodhisattvas see in different kinds of bodies. Without the slightest effort, they attain higher powers, self-masteries and accomplishments. 27. Mahamati again asked the Buddha, "May the Bhagavan please explain to us how all things are empty, non-arising, non-dual, and devoid of self-existence, so that once I and the other bodhisattvas understand that they are empty, non-arising, non-dual, and devoid of self-existence, we will be free of projections of existence and non-existence, and we will quickly realize unexcelled, complete enlightenment." The Buddha told Mahamati, "Listen closely and consider this well. I will now explain this for you." Mahamati answered, "Wonderful, Bhagavan. May we be so instructed." The Buddha began, "As for emptiness, Mahamati, emptiness belongs to an imagined reality. Mahamati, it is to those who are attached to an imagined reality that I speak of emptiness, non-arising, non-duality, and the absence of self-existence." Mahamati, briefly, there are 7 kinds of emptiness. The emptiness of characteristics, the emptiness of self-existence, the emptiness of phenomena, the emptiness of non-phenomena, the emptiness of ineffability, the great emptiness of the ultimate truth of Buddha knowledge, and the emptiness of mutual exclusion. What is meant by the emptiness of characteristics? The emptiness of characteristics refers to the emptiness of the individual or shared characteristics of whatever exists. Because the observable distinctions of contrast and combination are non-existent, neither individual nor shared characteristics arise. And because the existence of this, that, or both together does not exist, characteristics do not persist. Thus, I say the characteristics of whatever exists are empty. This is what is meant by the emptiness of characteristics. What is meant by the emptiness of self-existence? This refers to the non-arising of something's own existence. This is what is meant by the emptiness of something's self-existence. Thus I speak of the emptiness of self-existence. What is meant by the emptiness of phenomena? This refers to the lack of a self or anything that belongs to a self in the skandhas, which arise due to the conjunction of causes and the functioning of karma. This is what is meant by the emptiness of phenomena. Mahamati, since phenomena are empty, it turns out dependent reality is non-existent. This is what is meant by the emptiness of non-phenomena. What is meant by the emptiness of the ineffability of things? This means that because imagined reality is devoid of words, everything is ineffable. This is what is meant by the emptiness of the ineffability of things. What is meant by the great emptiness of the ultimate truth of Buddha knowledge? This refers to the emptiness of the habit energy of all erroneous views upon attaining the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. This is what is meant by the great emptiness of the ultimate truth of Buddha knowledge. What is meant by the emptiness of mutual exclusion? This refers to the emptiness of this not applying to that. This is what is meant by the emptiness of mutual exclusion. For example, Mahamati. If there are no elephants or horses, oxen or sheep in Ragaramatri Vihara but not no monks, and we say it is empty, the Vihara itself isn't empty, and the monks themselves are not empty, and it is not that elephants and horses are not present elsewhere. This refers to the individual characteristics of things, whereby one is not present in another. This is what is meant by the emptiness of mutual exclusion. Among these 7 kinds of emptiness, the emptiness of mutual exclusion is the crudest kind of emptiness and should be avoided. Mahamati, things do not give rise to themselves. This does not mean they do not arise, unless one is in samadhi. This is what is meant by non-arising. The absence of self-existence is what is meant by non-arising. What lacks self-existence is momentary and in continuous flux and manifests different states of existence but without possessing any existence of its own. Thus, whatever exists is devoid of self-existence. What does non-dual mean? This refers to everything being cloudy or sunny, long or short, bright or dark. Mahamati, everything is non-dual. Samsara isn't present in nirvana, and nirvana isn't present in samsara. This is because their existence is due to their different characteristics. This is what is meant by non-dual. And as with nirvana and samsara, this is true of everything else. Therefore, you should cultivate what is empty, non-arising, non-dual, and without self-existence. The Bhagavan then repeated this in verse. I always teach emptiness. To transcend eternity and annihilation. Samsara is like an illusion or dream. But karma is relentless. Space and nirvana. And 2 kinds of cessation. Fools create projections. The wise avoid what is or isn't. The Bhagavan then told Mahamati, the teaching of emptiness, non-arising, non-duality, and the absence of self-existence pervades all the sutras spoken by the Buddhas. Every sutra teaches these truths. But because every sutra responds to the longings of beings, they differ as to how they express these truths, which are not really in the words. Just as the sight of a mirage confuses a herd of deer, whereby the deer imagine the appearance of water where there is no water, likewise the teachings of the sutras are meant to gladden people's hearts. But Buddha knowledge is not to be found in the words. Therefore, trust the meaning and don't cling to the words. 28. Mahamati Bodhisattva then asked the Buddha. In the Sutras, the Bhagavan says that the Tathagata Garbha is intrinsically pure, endowed with 32 attributes and present in the bodies of all beings. And that like a priceless jewel wrapped in soiled clothing. The ever-present, unchanging Tathagatagarbha is likewise wrapped in the soiled clothing of the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas, and stained with the stain of the erroneous projections of greed, anger, and delusion, and that this is what all Buddhas teach. How is it that what the Bhagavan says about the Tathagatagarbha is the same as what followers of other paths say about a self? Bhagavan, followers of other paths also speak of an immortal creator without attributes, omnipresent and indestructible. And they say this, Bhagavan, is the self. The Buddha replied, Mahamati, the Tathagatagarbha of which I speak is not the same as the self mentioned by followers of other paths. Mahamati. When I speak about the Tathagatagarbha, sometimes I call it emptiness, formlessness, or intentionlessness, or realm of reality, dharma nature, or dharma body, or nirvana, what is devoid of self-existence, or what neither arises nor ceases, or original quiescence, or intrinsic nirvana, or similar expressions. It is to put an end to the fear foolish beings have about the expression no self that the Tathagatas, the Arhats, the fully enlightened ones proclaim the teaching of the Tathagatagarbha as a projectionless realm devoid of fabrications. Mahamati, bodhisattvas of the present and the future should not become attached to any view of a self. Take for example a potter who applies such things as manual labor, water, a stick, a wheel, and a string to a lump of clay to make different kinds of vessels. The Tathagata is also like this, applying wisdom and a variety of skillful means to what has no self and is free from projection. Sometimes I speak about the Tathagatagarbha and sometimes no self. Thus, the Tathagatagarbha of which I speak is not the same as the self spoken of by followers of other paths. This is what is meant by the teaching of the Tathagatagarbha. The Tathagatagarbha is taught to attract those members of other paths who are attached to a self so that they will give up their projection of an unreal self and will enter the threefold gate of liberation and aspire to attain unexcelled, complete enlightenment forthwith. This is why the Tathagatas, the Arhats, the fully enlightened ones speak in this manner about the Tathagatagarbha. To speak otherwise would be to agree with the followers of other paths. Therefore, Mahamati, in order to avoid the views of followers of other paths, you should rely on the selfless Tathagatagarbha. 29. The Buddha then repeated the meaning of this in verse. A continuous person in the skandhas, conditions and motes of dust. The creation of a powerful Lord. Projections of nothing but mind. 30. Thinking about beings in future ages, Mahamati asked the Buddha, Bhagavan, please tell us about the practices of realization whereby bodhisattvas become great practitioners. The Buddha told Mahamati, there are 4 practices the mastery of which enables bodhisattvas to become great practitioners. And which 4? Becoming adept at distinguishing the perceptions of one's own mind. Perceiving the non-existence of external existence, avoiding views of arising, duration, and cessation, and delighting in the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. These are the 4 practices the mastery of which enables bodhisattvas to become great practitioners. And how do bodhisattvas become adept at distinguishing the perceptions of their own minds? They regard the 3 realms like this. As merely distinctions of the mind, devoid of a self or what belongs to a self. As motionless and free from coming or going. The result of the habit energy of erroneous fabrications without beginning. And the various forms and phenomena of the 3 realms involving their body, their possessions, and the world around them as perceptions of those fabrications. This is how bodhisattvas become adept at distinguishing the perceptions of their own minds. And how do bodhisattvas become adept at perceiving the non-existence of external existence? Since everything is a dream or mirage, they regard the self-existence of everything that exists as the result of the habit energy of erroneous projections without beginning. This is how bodhisattvas become adept at perceiving the non-existence of external existence. And how do bodhisattvas become adept at avoiding views of arising, duration, and cessation? Since whatever exists is like an illusion or a dream, and its existence does not arise from itself, from another, or from a combination of both, but as a distinction of one's own mind, they therefore see external existence as non-existent, consciousness as not arising, and conditions as not combining but arising due to projections. When they see that all internal or external dharmas in the three realms cannot be grasped and are devoid of self-existence, their views of arising cease. And once they know that the self-existence of everything is illusory, they attain the forbearance of non-arising. And once they attain the forbearance of non-arising, they avoid views of arising, duration, and cessation. This is how bodhisattvas become adept at distinguishing and avoiding views of arising, duration and cessation. And how do bodhisattvas become adept at delighting in the personal realization of Buddha knowledge? Upon attaining the forbearance of non-arising, they dwell at the 8th stage of the bodhisattva path, where they are able to transcend characteristics of the mind, will and consciousness, the 5 dharmas, the modes of reality, and the 2 kinds of no-self, and where they acquire a projection body. Mahamati asked the Buddha, Bhagwan, why is it called a projection body? The Buddha replied, Mahamati, the reason it is called a projection body is because it travels quickly and without obstruction, like a thought. Thoughts travel to other places countless leagues away unobstructed by rock walls because of the memory of something experienced in the past. And they arise without interrupting the functioning of one's mind or interfering with one's body. Mahamati, such projection bodies are acquired at one and the same time. Endowed with higher powers and spiritual masteries obtained in the samadhi of the illusory, the different projection bodies of bodhisattvas appear simultaneously. Like unobstructed projections, in whatever realms they recall having vowed to bring those beings to perfection who delight in the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. Thus do bodhisattvas attain the forbearance of non-arising and dwell at the 8th stage of the bodhisattva path, where they exchange the body characterized by the mind, will and consciousness, the 5 dharmas, the modes of reality, and the 2 kinds of no-self, for a projection body and become adept at delighting in the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. These are the 4 practices the mastery of which enables bodhisattvas to become great practitioners and to which you should devote yourselves. 31. Mahamati once again asked, Bhagwan, please tell us about the causes and conditions of things so that once we are aware of their characteristics, we bodhisattvas will avoid erroneous views concerning their existence or non-existence, and we will not mistake their appearance as sequential or simultaneous. The Buddha replied, Mahamati, all things are characterized by 2 kinds of conditions, namely, external and internal. External conditions include such things as a lump of clay, a post, a wheel, a piece of string, a stick, water, and manual techniques. It is from the application of such conditions that a pot results. As with a pot from clay, the application of conditions likewise results in a rug from yarn, a mat from grass, a sprout from a seed, and butter from milk. These are the before and after results of external conditions. As for internal conditions, such things as ignorance, desire, and karma constitute the conditions, while the skandhas, dhatus, and ayatanas give rise to constitute the results of the conditions. They aren't separate, but this is how foolish people imagine them. This is what is meant by internal conditions. Mahamati, there are 6 kinds of causes. An immanent cause, a connecting cause, a characterizing cause, an instrumental cause, a manifesting cause, and an inactive cause. An immanent cause produces internal and external effects as soon as it becomes a cause. A connecting cause produces internal and external effects as soon as it forms a connection, such as the skandhas and seeds. A characterizing cause produces the characteristic of an uninterrupted continuity. An instrumental cause exerts supremacy like a chakravartin. A manifesting cause manifests causes and effects whenever projections occur, just as a lamp illuminates forms. And an inactive cause is the absence of projection that occurs with the interruption of continuity when something ceases. Mahamati, these are the projections of foolish people, and they do not occur sequentially or simultaneously. And how so? If they occurred simultaneously, there would be no difference between cause and effect, and it would be impossible to identify a cause. And if they occurred sequentially, it would be impossible to identify an individual entity. The non-occurrence of a sequential occurrence is like having no word for father in the absence of children. Mahamati, it is not true that what occurs sequentially is a continuity. It is merely a projection of what produces or what is produced by direct, supporting, continuous, or contributing causes. Mahamati, a sequential occurrence does not occur because it is characterized by an attachment to an imagined reality. It does not occur sequentially or simultaneously because it belongs to the perceptions of your own mind. And it does not occur sequentially or simultaneously, Mahamati, because the individual or shared characteristics of an external existence do not exist. It is only because you are unaware that the perceptions of your own mind are projections that forms appear. Therefore you should avoid views of a sequential or simultaneous occurrence characterizing the operation of causes and conditions. The Buddha then repeated the meaning of this in verse. Nothing arises from causes and conditions. Nor does anything cease. At the heart of ceasing and arising, arise conceptions of causes and conditions. This isn't to stop ceasing and arising, or the continuity of causes and conditions. Only to stop foolish people from misconceiving causation. Something existing or not due to causes. No such thing occurs. The confusion of habit energy. From this the three realms appear. In truth nothing arises from causes. Nor does anything cease. Regard conditioned things like flowers in the sky. Let go deluded views. The grasping and the grasped. Nothing has arisen or ever will. Nor do causes or conditions exist. Nothing exists at all. And these are nothing but words.